Hey folks, Salty Seaman here, talking a little bit about going into one of my little geek topics here. You'll be seeing now and again, along with, of course, the military content you come to expect. For those of y'all interested, this is going to be about Dungeons and Dragons, and of course, this is not interest you. Feel free to scroll by these videos and just stick to my movie reviews and whatnot. Totally cool with me, but I'm interested in trying out a few different things, and this one caught my attention today. I currently run in both a Skype online group playing several different games and a real life group currently playing 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, though we also play many different games. Kind of a renaissance here in my started in my 30s. I played all the way through high school. Uh, Early on in my Navy career, one of the guys I still play with, my friend Brett, who I've interviewed on this channel. And of course, I've talked about on Tales from the Fleet. And then it was kind of out of it, about 2000 to about 2009. I wasn't really playing any role playing tabletop. Just hadn't found a group like minded people in the Navy, or at least enough of it that ever happened. And then around 2009, with the advent of Skype and ability to, find places you could roll online, me and my friend started talking about, my friend Brett, we started talking about, hey, I think we can do this online. Let's see if we can get enough people. And it started off, it was just three of us, me, him, my brother Billy. So it was like, and then we would switch off. The three of us would run our own different campaigns. We were doing Werewolf of the Apocalypse, where I played a lot of that with Brett and Yakuska. Then we move on to we do dabble in Dungeons and Dragons, and we have our own home brews based off the D10 system. We added more players, more friends of ours came in. And I moved here to Atlanta. My best friend ended up putting together a group of people he knew, including me. And now we've been playing every Thursday for about 3 years, coming on 3 years now. And I said currently we're on 5th edition D&D, but we quite a few of us taking turns playing DM, storyteller, game master, whatever you want to call it. I've done it enough times in my life that I've seen a lot of done a lot of the mistakes new game dungeon masters and whatnot. We'll just say dungeon masters as a generic term. So I think everyone knows that better, but you know what I mean. I've made the mistakes. I've seen the mistakes made, and I've seen when I've known when I've done well, and then when other DMs have done well, and also I've kind of rolled my eyes and what the fuck are you thinking with this? But so give a few tips for you out there. Maybe you've been playing a while. Maybe you're just making the switch over to tabletop from something else. You're ready to dive into it, but you don't really know the ins and outs of running a game. So I'll give you a few tips and starter points here. First off, we'll go with, I think, the biggest one. Besides just learning actually we'll start with that. Just learning the rules. That's the thing, and I've definitely messed up. Getting so excited about my story and kind of half-assing through the rule books and what I should know as a storyteller for whatever system you're running, and really not trying to memorize. I mean, you need to know a lot of stuff off the top of your head. You need to be prepared. You need to have the list in front of you. Shortcuts, and that's why DM screens are so great, because there's always this stuff you got to look up, and your players have picked weird spells and advantages and abilities or whatever, and you constantly got to ask them and look it up, and like you don't know, you really weren't paying attention. You just saw that it met the requirement, and you didn't do your own homework and making sure these guys weren't overpowered, or because a lot of your players will learn to abuse the system, especially with a DM who's just trying to push through this thing. They're really not reading the rules good. They're really not paying attention to what their players are getting, as long as it's meeting the book requirement. And you get these guys who we'll call them min maxers. There's people who learn to very savvy with game mechanics, and they've learned to create characters who are they take enough bullshit flaws that they can pump up all their other stats and things like of that nature. Create get a group of spells or whatnot that are just enough with their background that you've allowed them, that they create these weird spamming chains of power, stuff like that. and a lot of that comes from the DM not paying attention. And I said I've done it. I don't think I've never intentionally tried to pull it on a DM. I try to I like playing by the rules of the game. It's like that's the fun part of it. If the DM gives you an Iggy, he gives you an Iggy. But I've seen it enough, and watch. I got a certain friend in one of my skate games. Well, he always creates one of those characters, and no matter how much we try to watch him, he always pulls out some bullshit. So know your material. And this is a worst case scenario. You're constantly looking stuff up. You're contradicting your own rules because you're not paying attention. Not remembering which version of D&D you're playing with. Whether or not it's got THACO or which way the AC is going. I mean, you need to go in there. Knowing the base set of rules need to be memorized, and you need to have charts and whatever else handy. That other stuff you can't maybe remember off the top of your head. But that'll take us into, say, you're well prepared. You know the rules inside and out. You've given all the players your house rules. And so now you're going to start your grand adventure, and you've got those elaborate plots set out. You got point A to B to C all the way down to L. And yeah, your players are not doing what you kind of think they should be doing. They're approaching the problems erratically, or they're taking the complete wrong leaps of logic. All of a sudden, instead of going from point A to point B, they're already going to point D because somebody rolled a really good investigation roll and caught a clue too early. Now they're jumping ahead several steps. And so it's a lot of DMs will either in game or even meta just kind of point like, no, stop. You need to go to Lancaster next. You should not be going to Waterdeep now. Or to know everything's snowed in. You can only go to point B, and that's another way to railroad them in. Or even worse, like, come on guys, it's not where you're supposed to be going next. Blah blah blah. Look at all these clues I gave you for Lancaster. And that's a poor way to handle it. You can handle it straight up and just let them go. Obviously, your elaborate plot's going to have to, unless they get really, really lucky again, probably going to have to turn them back around with a dead end at Waterdeep, and now they got to go back to Lancaster. You can put out enough clues to let them know, like, maybe even be slightly ham-fisted about it. They'll, choo-choo at you and go about your day. But you do what you got to do. The worst thing is, trying to keep them on a straight rail just because you can't prepare like how you're going to treat the situation now that they've gone a bit off the rails. And now that's the other side of the coin we got to talk about, when your players are just determined to really, really be off the rails of what you have created. Now, a lot of times this happens when players are just being dicks. They're just one or two really obnoxious people who just love to gleefully break a tabletop game, and then you get everyone else joining in because it looks like fun. Now, a lot of times it's because your plot is annoying. You're trying to keep them on the rails a lot of times. They've already figured out your great plot twist, like the second you introduce the NPC. So like they're having a little fun, and they're kind of poking at you like, hey, this is we're intentionally trying to do the craziest thing possible because we're bored with what your story is doing. So you got to keep that in mind too. Which is it your players are being? Are they just being intentional assholes trying to break your game? Go super off the rails, ignore their alignments, whatever. Decide just to become murder. They're supposed to be a wandering band of adventurers, and they decide they're just going to live a life of crime as murder hobos. I mean, that should just happen like very incrementally. That shouldn't be like right off the bat. But yeah, you have to. It's like you say, well, is there something wrong with my game? Maybe even if you're going off a module or a pre-written story, maybe you've got to use your own creative skills to make adjustments to make it more interesting, or move the plot along maybe a little faster. You got to make those things on the fly, and then that's a lot of problems. A lot of people who want to DM find out. Especially if they're big planners and they're not really good at improv. It becomes very obvious. And I've definitely worked with those DMs. They don't, they struggle, and some of the ones that struggle with it, get by. Some of them just can't at all. They'll just call halt and basically throw up a very, very basic wall and put them back on path where they're supposed to be. Sometimes, which creates resentment, especially if they're thinking they're being clever. And that's definitely another point to get into, is rewarding cleverness, is rewarding problem solving and role playing. The characters using their known character traits to create, solutions to problems that maybe you didn't foresee. Say for instance, you have a group of five adventuring heroes in Dungeons and Dragons, straight up fantasy trope. You got the halfling thief, you got the human barbarian warrior, you got the dwarf, and you got the elf. All good and fun. You got them coming up. They're like first level guys. They come into a room. You see a locked door at the other end. You got 5 skeletons, one for each guy. One of them's holding the key. So boom, easy setup. However, your adventurers are like, you know what? I got an idea, and they start retreating. And they retreat back, a couple of corridors, and set up this elaborate pulley system. And they're going to put the half elf or the halfling thief up on the pulleys, and as the skeletons shamble past looking for us, we're gonna have someone dip him down, grab this key out of his hand, remaining hiding, and let the skeletons wander off. And their roles are good enough that they complete the action. When you put obstacles in the way, you think this, like, what are you idiots doing? Just fight the skeletons. But they solve the problem. They get the key. Now, how do you, experience wise reward them? And this is where you see a lot of the taste of the DM come out. And this is where you got to be fair, because a lot of guys will, they did not slaughter their skeletons, but they'll make sure just because of their ingenuity and cleverness, they managed to find a way around it, and they might reward them an equivalent of the skeleton slayed plus a bonus for pulling it off or whatever. Some DMs will be very, very stingy about it. It's like, well, you get they'll be like, well, you get no combat experience, so they'll throw them a bone or 2 experience points for the pulley or whatever. But they're more just like, especially you get this for guys who come from another system that is more combat oriented, especially when it comes to experience points. You come from, certain video games, or, I think I never played a lot of Warhammer, but, Warhammer, that's how experience works. It's from killing baddies. They may have a really hard time grasping that, like, yeah, that was cool what you guys did, but, you guys don't get basically no experience for it. You can't do that. You need to, maybe not give, maybe if you are still like, they should be thinking more like, well, maybe at least they don't get the equivalent for the killing of the skeletons. They get some good chunk for the item, if you value the combat experience that much. But, you definitely got to give a concession for the players doing something you're not expecting and it works. You got to pay attention, look at their little tells. Because, the guys who are going to be thinking outside the box and come up with weird ideas are usually going to be the 1 or 2 of the same guys or gals in the session. So, as a good DM, you need to be focusing on, thinking around them, because they're going to try to think around whatever, if you're throwing simple D&D plots at them, they're going to be thinking around it pretty easily. Or they're just weird thinkers and they just come up with weird ideas you wouldn't think of. You've got to start, planning for that. Creating the roadblocks as needed, but at the same time, allowing them to be free and, maybe gently try to nudge them along the right path, going back to railroading and allowing the players to be the players. Because you'll learn over time, especially if you run the same group of people, even in different games, you'll always see the same group kind of create very recognizable patterns of how they interact, even if they're playing completely different characters. A lot of guys like to constantly play characters who are at odds with each other because they have fun with the end game bickering and rivalry. So they always seem to create characters who are going to be antagonistic against each other. And that's cool. And you got to look, you got to plan for that and know that's probably going to be a thing. Same thing, you get 2 guys who always like to be partnered up and, be the yin to the other one's yang, that's going to become obvious. Even if they tried at the beginning, their characters somehow end up doing that anyway. And, that's how player dynamics work. So it's really good with keeping the same group of people because you learn their their tastes and likes and dislikes. You'll see them create a lot of times. You'll see them create a lot of times the same type of character. I've been pointed out several times. I like playing the rogue, the kind of bad boy, but he's not usually not a total piece of shit. Chaotic good to straight up neutral, depending on the system. But yeah, I have a tendency for those characters, but I also play against type. I try to. I've got a paladin who I eventually just kind of coaxed his character, just became this really arrogant high elf racist. So I still managed to turn him, you know, have a little fun with the paladin idea, and a few other different kinds. I try to play against my normal type, but they all do seem to become me after a while. I'm a smartass by nature. Even if I try to create characters who shouldn't be smartasses, they tend to be smartasses. So, but yeah, you'll learn to figure that out as we play the same people. When you get a new player in the game, and like it's always interesting to see like how they're going to get into that group dynamic. After a while, if you've been playing with the same group of people, a new person could slide in pretty easily, or a lot of times they're just kind of overwhelmed and they'll just be very quiet because they don't, they're really trying to figure out where they stick their 2 cents in, and especially if your players already know each other pretty well and they have like kind of a rhythm to how they converse. So you got to make sure if they're overcrowding the new player, that they get their say. You make sure like hold on, like you hear them about trying to say something and they get interrupted by the other players just bickering at each other. Like hold on, new player X has something to say, and they'll figure it out from there. But make sure you're looking out for that, and new player isn't overwhelmed and feeling left out. At the same time, recognize there's players who like to play who don't like to contribute a whole lot. They just like going along with everyone else is doing. They just want to roll some combat rolls and maybe occasionally yell something out in their character's voice. But yeah, they otherwise don't really have an opinion on which way the plot is going. But allow them to don't force it out of them. If they don't want to talk, they don't want to talk. A lot of times those guys, when they do say something, it's usually interesting or important. So I kind of like letting those guys be there, but at the same time, especially definitely advise playing over voice on a computer. It's like controlling everyone talking over each other is really hard because you can't separate the voices like you can in person. There's like everyone has a slight delay to each other. So, sometimes it's tough to keep order. So keep that in mind. Let everyone know, like, take charge as the DM. Say, hey, everyone, shut the fuck up. Like, stop. And tell them, okay, so-and-so speak, speak one at a time. So-and-so go. Something like that. A little easier to do in person just because, like, you can, the ambience of the room, you can kind of pick out, okay, that's so-and-so talking, he's trying to say something, he keeps getting interrupted, okay, boom, boom, boom. But either way, you gotta watch out for it. And I think finally for this edition, if people like these, I think I'll make a couple more and, create tales. I am coming up with been recording my 5th edition game, so I'm going to start cutting that together and putting those up too. But there's a trope that pretty much every storyteller, DM, whatever, kind of falls into. It's the all powerful ally NPC. Now this could be a mentor or the master of the lord they report to, or the great wizard who's putting them on whatever it is. It's this person who's much higher level, much more powerful, probably knows a lot more what's going on than your characters do. But as a rule, they're probably not going along on every adventure because it's if they are, the DM's not letting it's a situation where the DM might not be letting the players have a lot to say in the plot, because a character like that's if played how they should be played, are usually going to make decisions more correctly because they know what's going on, and just having them around as powerful whatnots. They can tend to break situations. So when you have that character, you got to be careful with them. Have legitimate reasons they're not there a lot. And the reason the actual party, but unfortunately, like plot dictates that person gets involved, And a lot of times it's a player's boon because they have a powerful NPC at their disposal. And it might be a situation where you think that's needed, and you don't mind giving the players a little extra firepower for some kind of, big deal situation. But other times it's also annoying because you've got this person who, of all rights, should be leading the party and coming up with things, and they don't seem to really, they seem to be a bit confused a lot. They don't seem to come up with any ideas. They wait for hear what the players directly at. Most DMs, of course, they want the players to solve the problem, not the NPC. So they straight up ask the NPC because he's there and should know, or her, and they're like, just like, I just can't think of anything. And so you get these, and if you repeat it too many times, it makes your NPC start to look like an idiot because they don't seem to know anything. Example, we have a Werewolf the Apocalypse game. We have a biker one. Just the nature of it. We start off as prospects before we even get our patches or whatnot. So at the beginning of the game, it's like prospects solving a lot of problems, even though we're usually with patch members, but they don't seem to have any authority over us or ideas, and they're just kind of like, oh, you've prospects figured out. Let's prove how good you are. It's like, okay. And then other stuff is like, once we're patched, we run. Sometimes you'd be on missions with the president of the club, and like the president could never come up with a plan of anything. So we just learned not to even ask if he was along, and we advanced to the point where it's not a big deal. Like my character became the VP, so I'm 9/10 of the time going to be the most senior person in any group. So unless the president comes along, which becomes rare and rare needed as I'm already the VP. But it led to just a lot of awkward missions where, just because of the nature of a biker group, you've got to have all these different bikers up to including the president, and just no one seems to be competent except the player characters. But those are things you got to watch. If you're going to have that character, make sure you're not stuck in a situation where you got to use them in person with the player characters a lot, because it's either going to be overpower the game or your attempt to not have them solve all the problems is going to make them seem really incompetent. So I think that's a bit all I need to say about this for now. So let me know in the comments what you think. You're a D&D guy. If you stumbled upon this and it was helpful for you as you're about to start your first campaign or maybe even second, and the first one didn't go so well. That is all the Salty Seaman has got for now. Safe plays out there, everybody.